Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Joe Valli, the author of the EXITpreneur's Playbook. We just got done with that interview and it was awesome. Ken, what did you think?
David, man, that was a great interview. Who better to have on the Firing the Man podcast than Joe Valli? I think he had mentioned he's been self-employed for 24 years. When I heard, that he was publishing the EXITpreneur's Playbook, I'm like, we got to get Joe on the show. He delivers tons of value. He got deep into ad backs, state of the market, aggregators, everything, man. It was a great interview. David, what'd you think?
His experience really stood out to me. He is a partner at Quiet Like Brokerage. He has bought, built, and sold over a half a dozen companies. He talks in the interview about, talking to 9,000 entrepreneurs that are thinking about exiting their business, and the wealth of knowledge that he has in this space is incredible. So I'm about halfway through the book, absolutely loving it. Joe was kind enough to offer 3 free chapters to our listeners. If you go to firingtheman.com/EXITpreneur, you can access those there. On to the episode. Joe, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
All right, David. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first things first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Now, you just cut me off when I start rambling too long, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
Man, I've been self-employed since 1997. I fired the man, I think, before they would have fired me, right? I gave my notice and they were kind enough to actually walk me out. HR had to walk me out of my last job. And it was a company that I started at in 1994 where I was employee number 34. 3.5 years later, when I left, there were over 1,000. And it was awesome until it was not, right? I loved going in. I'd try to be the first one in, the last one to leave, and used to compete with a couple of guys that's what we were going to do. And then it eventually got to the point where it was just work your ants marching into work and then marching out, and you couldn't have the impact anymore. And like any small company, you grow to your level of incompetence because you started early and they promote you to that level. I bailed, left, started my own company back in 1997, and I've been self-employed since then. During that time, I've built, bought, and sold over 6 companies of my own. My last current venture is a partner at Quiet Light brokerage firm, and I've just written the book, The EXITpreneur's Playbook.
Nice. So, Joe, what inspired you to write the EXITpreneur's Playbook?
Well, that's a good question. Look, in the last 9 years, Ken, I've talked to probably 9,000 entrepreneurs, one-on-one conversations with people about their businesses, them trying to understand the value of your business and could they exit or not. And too many of them woke up and just decided they were done and they wanted to sell, which is, definitely too late. They're not going to get the maximum value for it. And it's no two businesses are alike, and there's a lot of detail and everything is kind of specialized. So one conversation with one person may be different than the next conversation. And I just honestly needed to put it in some format, right? It's too much water cooler talk where people are getting misinformation. Even one-on-one conversations with an advisor, it can't all be absorbed in 1 call, 2 calls, 10 calls. There's too much information. So the book is really a collection of all of those conversations that walks anybody through where they're at in their business to their eventual exit and everything in between.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I did get to read 1 chapter, and it was pretty deep. I enjoyed it. I'm excited to get to read the rest of the book, but 9,000 conversations kind of condensed into 1 book. To me, that's packed with value. So I'm excited to see the full version.
It's a lot of conversations.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bet. So one thing that stood out to me in your book was you talked a lot about training for an exit as opposed to, exit planning. Can you talk about that and what can entrepreneurs be doing to train for an exit?
Well, doesn't it just sound awful, exit planning, right? First and foremost, it's just like, who the hell wants to do that? And that's part of the problem is that it's historically been called exit planning and nobody wants to do it, right? I've been an entrepreneur, right, for 21 years, and I've never written a business plan. I've never, had an exit planning strategy necessarily. And so it didn't really resonate. And honestly, the word exit in anything is almost a bad thing, yet the name of the book is The EXITpreneur's Playbook. So I've either done something great or foolish, I'm not sure which. But like anything else in life, if you want to go run a 5K or a triathlon or a marathon, you got to train for it, right? And that's just exercise. But if you go out and run a 5K without training for it, you may get through it, right? It's not that far to run, but you won't run as well as you could have. It wouldn't have been as pleasant and fun and as strong and as competitive. And after you finish, you're going to be in a lot of pain because you're out of shape. It's no different than an eventual exit of your business. If you don't train for it, if you don't get the knowledge that you need, the path to that exit is going to lead to a deal structure that's not going to be great, the value that's not going to be maximum, and then the training and transition or the longer transition period afterwards is not going to be attractive either. It's kind of like choosing your pain. Do you want to choose the pain of working out and getting in shape now so you're healthy later? Or choose the pain of, nah, just have another beer, not do anything, and pay for it physically later? It's the same when training for your exit in your business.
In terms of timeline, so, both Ken and I have a handful of e-commerce companies, and the goal is to exit all of those. And, one thing that, can you start too early, or if that is someone's end goal, when should they start training?
Yeah. Historically, you've heard people say you should start thinking about your exit the day you start your business. And the problem with that is you're just trying to keep all the wheels on the bus on the way to driving revenue. And it's hard to do, right? You got duct tape on those wheels. The reality is, I think, though, that if it's in the back of your mind, at least, that eventually this is a business that you can sell, right? When I sold mine in 2010, I woke up and decided to sell. I didn't realize I could sell my business. And I've been self-employed for 13 years already. And it just occurred to me, wait a minute, I might have a sellable asset here. The difference today is that most people in the e-commerce world realize that they do have a sellable asset for the most part. The question is, how much is it worth? So I think the sooner you can start thinking about it, the better. Ideally, I think people that get the most value on their exit are, given it to 1 to 2 years in advance of actually exiting. You got to set that exit goal, ideally, and then reverse engine a path to it. You need to know how to calculate sellers' discretionary earnings and to figure out the current value of your businesses and all this stuff. It's fairly complicated, but the sooner you can do it, the better. But I wouldn't give a specific date other than just give it plenty of time. You don't want to wake up someday and realize that the day is here and you haven't done any training for it.
Nice. And so, Joe, something that David and I have been doing is kind of like what you're saying, the ad backs and kind of going through all these motions and doing the planning. But one thing that we're kind of like trying to figure out where the needle is, what is the right amount to exit for? Let's say, like, hey, as a solopreneur or you have a small team, are you going to grow to 7 figures, 1 million, you're going to go to 5, you're going to go to 10. At what point does it become a headache and more, have you seen it in like your M&A, like where do you see sellers most stressed out and capped out at?
Yeah. It's such an individual thing, right? What's the right number? And it's up to everybody's individual goals and preferences. You just said something there, do you get it to a certain point and then you need to get it to the next level? You need to change who you are, maybe, right? It gets to that level of making sure you don't grow the business beyond your own level of expertise. Because if you get it to a certain point and you get this entrepreneurial affliction that we all have, which is, called, I can do that, right? You're like, well, I got it to 10 million. I can get it to 50. I can do that. But if you're really bad at HR and managing people, that's a weakness of mine, right? So I either have to have someone in place to do it, or if I do it myself, I have to change. I have to be better at that. And that drains the living out of me. So it's better for me to never grow a company where I have to be a great HR person or put somebody in place. Maybe at that point, I'm going to go ahead and exit, right? Maybe my sweet spot is growing to the business, to a $2 million exit value, selling it, moving on to my next adventure. And I stay there. I don't need the bragging rights of selling a $50 million company or whatever the number might be. You have to understand who you are as an entrepreneur. I can't help you with an exit goal and what's right for you. That's up to an individual. I talked to somebody yesterday. His original 10-year plan was a $5 million exit. Some things went wrong in the business. He's tired. He's frustrated. His wife's in the business. They're both exhausted. And now they've changed their mind and they want a $2 million exit. If we can get them beyond that hurdle and that emotional frustration, I think it's best for them to make some changes and ride it out so they get that $5 million exit. But they've got to make a decision that's right for them as a family, because their health and happiness comes first.
Interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. And I think for me, you know, personally, I think when it feels like it's work, then maybe it's time. Hitting a ceiling on that versus, you know, enjoying what I'm doing versus grinding and getting exhausted.
Yeah, grinding it out, you know, on the hamster wheel and you can't get off. I would still say that you should set an exit goal in dollars, you know, regardless of the time in your business. Set an exit goal in dollars. So you know you're always working towards something, because as you're grinding it out, it might be less of a grind if you know there's an end in sight. But then if you're marching towards that and you've hit that goalpost and your value of your business is there, you can always move it down, right? You can move that goalpost to adding another 200,000 or 2 million or whatever the number might be. But that's the biggest problem that we have, I think, as entrepreneurs, is that we don't set financial goals, right? It's usually in terms of revenue or maybe cash flow or net income, but the greatest value is probably in the exit. And I think that's where the goal should be set in dollars. And what I find is that it makes the grind days so much easier, because you know you're marching towards something.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I like it. Now, the how often? So you say, okay, you're going to set the goal, and then how often would you recommend, you know, a business owner getting evaluation or figuring out where, you know, because for me, I'm like, I'm not going to know a good valuation, right? So how often would you say, you know, someone reach out to you or you know, and find out what that is at that point in time?
Yeah, honestly, it's creating a relationship. It's not, can you give me a valuation? Okay, see you. It's more creating a relationship. And, you know, that happens over time. You know, a client of mine named Joe, right? Different Joe, of course. He came and he had an exit goal of $1 million. We did the evaluation, looked at his discretionary earnings, trends of his business, a couple of hero SKUs. And the reality is his business wasn't worth $1 million. So I kind of stomped on his heart a little bit, told him what he had to do. And he sort of understood how to work towards that goal of an exit. He ended up, you know, we ended up touching base every few months with updates. Sometimes it would be 2 months, sometimes it would be 4. But he marched towards that goal, hit that goal, but held the business longer. It wound up with about a $2.5 million exit because he got trained. He understood what he had to do. And those tough days got easier because he had a true exit goal in mind. And this is a kid that, you know, he was a father 2 days after his 17th birthday. You know, his girlfriend was doing all of his homework and so that he could just graduate because he was working full time. This is somebody that was grinding it out from a very young age, nearly went bankrupt, had drug addictions, started an e-commerce business, and sort of grabbed onto that EXITpreneur mentality and followed it through. And now, you know, he really doesn't have to work, given he's got very low overhead. And he's young. He's going to continue to work, but he's happy to do it his way now at this point.
Now, Joe, you had mentioned starting a relationship, and I think that's a really good point. And I'd like to dive into kind of the role of a broker in a transaction. And, you know, another thing that you mentioned was the entrepreneur mindset of, I'm going to do this alone. Like I can figure this out. Yeah. As entrepreneurs, we go through that all the time. Yeah. And so, to use an example to illustrate this, I was talking to my cousin the other day. He is selling his house. He's selling that house to his neighbor and was contemplating whether he should get a real estate agent. And I recommended no. Part of a real estate agent's job is to find a buyer. And that's buying or selling a house is a fairly easy transaction relative to buying or selling a business. And so can you talk about the role of a broker and why you ought not to go at it alone?
Yeah. You know, the real estate brokers out there in the world, if you're listening, you may argue that it's much more difficult than we make it out to be, and I think it's probably true. You know, the role of an advisor, what we call ourselves at Quiet Light, call us brokers, I guess call us whatever you want. It's the biggest job that I have in the client relationship is actually managing your emotions and expectations, because I promise you, every deal is going to go sideways at some point. And if you go it alone, you're going to be so tired and frustrated, you're going to basically drop your pants, so to speak, financially, and just, okay, I'm so close, I don't want to lose this, I will take less. And that's not what you want to do. My job is to keep your emotions in check almost more than anything else, and be almost a therapist for you, because it's very emotional when you're, you know, a week away from $500,000, $1 million to $5 million. You will get very emotional because you're so close. Back it up 3 weeks, you know, you've got to get multiple offers in front of you, not a single buyer. So our job is, yes, to first understand the true value of your business and make sure that it is listed at a price that will be attractive to both you and the buyers of the business. Second, you got to vet those buyers. We would bring hundreds of people looking at your type of business. On average, year to date, we're recording this in mid-June, year to date, we've had 4.4 offers on every listing year to date. Things are kind of in a frenzy in 2020. You've got to get multiple offers to the table, multiple buyers looking at it, not only so you get maximum value, but also the best deal structure. You want to get the deal structure right. There's a lot of nuances to it. You know, one of the things you both probably heard of, the aggregators, they're rolling up FBA businesses, right? Anybody that's got an FBA business has gotten one of those emails. They've created something called a stability payment. If you Google it, you won't find it, but they make those on every offer. Essentially, it's an earnout. If the business is at 90% of what it was pre-closing, 12 months later, they'll give you that earnout or that stability payment. The problem with the way they structure is they say if it's within 90%, you get $250,000. If it's at 89.9, you get zero. So you've got to do different scales to that. But what if they run out of inventory? You've got to get that clause into it as well, depending upon the type of deal structure. If they run out of inventory and they get to 88.9% instead of the 90%, is it your fault? Should you get punished? No, there needs to be a clause in there to account for that. If they run out of inventory, all bets are off. These are the reasons why I wrote the book. It's there. It will help you if you're selling the business on your own. But I think that the best approach, look, take this with a grain of salt, because I own an advisory firm and I'm a broker as well. I do think the best approach is to have somebody on your side fighting for you, because things will go wrong, and they do go wrong. And you know, that person fighting for you is making sure that your emotions are in check and that they're still getting you the best deal and deal structure possible. If you go it alone, that you just risk not understanding all the nuances and getting emotional at the end. And I know we all think we're beyond that, but when money's on the line, we tend to get a little jittery.
Yeah, absolutely. So Joe, now you mentioned the aggregators, and that's kind of it's a fairly new thing in the last maybe 6 or 12 months. It's really ramping up. And, David and I get emails every week, probably multiple emails every week from different aggregators saying, oh, hey, love your brand, blah, blah, blah. What is the right answer? So sometimes I delete them. Sometimes if I recognize that company, I might reply and let them know, hey, I'm not interested, but just, at the end of the day, do you recommend building a relationship with the aggregators? Or if someone is coming to, Joe Valley at Quiet Light, are those aggregators going to all be sitting at the table anyway? Does it matter?
Yeah, they're all looking at every one of our listings. I would build the relationship. I just said a moment ago that it's a good idea to have somebody on your side fighting for you. But if you go through the EXITpreneur's playbook and you fully understand the value of your business, and you have enough aggregators that are looking, if you're prepared, it's possible that you may be able to do that on your own. It's just when things fall off the rails, though, that it does get tough. And I've seen listings get delisted. I've seen utility patents show up where they didn't exist before that take listings off the rails or transactions off the rails. All sorts of things can happen, and you got to have the right aggregator. And I'll tell you what, it's not just the name brand aggregators of the world that are out there, right? It's not just Thrasio and Perch that you want to talk to. There are 50 plus now, and some of the unknowns, as long as they've got committed capital in the bank, then I would have a conversation with them. But I wouldn't talk to them until you understand the real value of your own business. We had a conversation on the team the other day, how do you help people that are talking to aggregators and they think they want to sell to an aggregator? Educate them, help them, and let them go at it if they want to go at it. If they understand the value of what the advisor does, then they'll choose the advisor. You just have to make your own choice, right? We're all entrepreneurs. We all think we can do that. And in many cases we can, right? We're all entrepreneurs right now. We did it. Maybe it's possible you could sell your own online business as well. I give you all the tools in the book to do that, from calculating sellers' discretionary earnings to understanding the ad-back schedule to there's a chapter on aggregators, chapter 13. It was added at the last minute because of what's happening right now. It's been going on for a while, but it's really, hitting its stride now. And then there's deal structures. I go through all of the deal structures that they're going to throw at you. Here's the problem with the aggregators. I like these guys, right? I've had dinner with many of them. They're smart, they're intelligent, they're well-educated, they're really likable. And that's how they've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. If they were all assholes, nobody would give them any money, right? But they're good people and people trust them, so they give them money. Their pitch to you that you've gotten in the email is, hey, we love your brand. We want to buy it. We'll do it with cash. Don't pay a broker's fee. And then you get your offer. Hey, I shut that off. Sorry, guys. And then you get your offer. And, it's not all cash. It might be 60% cash with a 20% earnout and a 20% stability payment. And, oh, by the way, the working capital peg is that we want 2 months worth of your inventory at no cost. It gets ugly fast, right? If you have 10 of them on your own or through an advisor competing against each other, looking at a package that you put together about your business, they'll understand there are multiple offers coming in and you need to do the best thing. We're seeing more people get away from the earnouts, and they call them profit sharing, but it's an earnout. Stability payments are ugly. The inventory, right? Do you want to give away $200,000 worth of inventory? You avoided the broker fee, but do you want to give away $200,000 worth of inventory? I hope not, right? But the amount of cash that they're needing to come up with as they compete with each other is rising. The deal structures are so much better than they were just 2 years ago. And you can go about it on your own, but it's just a little tricky and a little dangerous. I think again, total grain of salt, and I'm not here to pitch Quiet Light at all. I think good advisors earn their money all day long. Otherwise they wouldn't be in business, right? They put more money in your pocket with a better deal structure so you can sleep at night. That's what they should do. That's what they get paid for. If they don't do that, then they are not going to survive.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And one thing I want to add is in my previous life, I worked in a transaction services consulting firm and probably saw somewhere between 60 and 70 deals during my time there. And what you often would see is the buyers would be much more educated in the process. It oftentimes wasn't their first rodeo, whereas the sellers, they had spent their entire life growing this business. And so this was their first exit. And so I know with my brands, as we're looking towards an exit, I'm going to need some guidance there. And Joe, I'm going to be giving you a call here in a couple of years when the time is right. So, but anyway, I think those are all really good points. Now, one thing that you've brought up a few times is seller discretionary earnings. And for our listeners that are unfamiliar with that, can you describe what that is? And then talk about the industry multiples going on right now.
Yeah, this is why I wrote the book, by the way, because I'm going to explain it, but it's going to go right over some people's heads. I was on a podcast like this a few years ago. This guy, brilliant Amazon seller. We dive into it, and then at the end of the show, he tries to reiterate it, and he got it wrong. It's simple. It's a formula, but it gets pretty complex, and I give you all the details there. So seller's discretionary earnings is simple in its surface level. It's net income, right? So you're going to be able to run a profit and loss, folks, on an accrual basis. Net income plus add backs equals seller's discretionary earnings. Simple as that. Then you can say, what the hell is an add back? Chapter 11 is all about the add backs. There's 3 different levels of add backs. An example of one that is often missed would be cash back, right? You guys, cashback credit cards are essentially a discount on advertising or a discount on expenses. Most people don't run that through their business. They just take that cash back and it goes over to their personal account. If it's not on the P&L, they think, oh no, I can't count it. It's an owner benefit. If it's an owner benefit, it goes in the add back schedule, right? As long as it's a one-time expense that doesn't carry forward, an adjustment or things of that nature. I've seen cash back or rewards converted to just on paper to the cash value. That can add anywhere from $25,000 to $100,000 to the value of a business. And that's in cash back. So then you apply the multiple to it and it can go up quite a bit. Another detailed, deep level 3 one is, if you renegotiated your cost of goods sold 6 months ago, you're listing your business now, you renegotiated it 6 months ago by $1 a unit and you sell 5,000 units a month, every single month. Well, you've got that first 6 months on your P&L that is not reflecting the new normal. So you take that first 6 months, $1 times those 5,000 units, and then you'd put that in the add back schedule. So you've got $30,000 that would be adjusted and added back there. There's 18 different types of add backs that I talk about in chapter 11 on add backs. And I think that it will help you understand. A lot of people will just run a profit and loss statement and go, wow, okay, it's not as valuable as I thought it was. But you really have to understand the nuances of it. If you've got, a salary, if you're paying yourself $100,000 and you're an owner operator of the business, that's an owner benefit. Therefore, it's an add back. What most people miss is the payroll taxes for that owner. They don't add that back. There's so many nuances to it that get really complicated. But simply put, seller's discretionary earnings is net income plus add backs.
And I know that's a very complex topic, and I thought you did an awesome job at explaining it. But read the book, folks, the EXITpreneur's Playbook. And so walk me through this. So someone reads chapter 11, they have a very good understanding of seller's discretionary earnings, and they calculate that their seller's discretionary earnings is $500,000.
Yeah.
Just some back of the napkin math. What could they expect in today's current climate?
It depends upon the type of business, of course.
In e-commerce business.
Right. All right. E-commerce. So we're talking physical product business is what you mean when you say e-commerce business.
Yep.
Right. So there's a value range section that I put in the book, and it's subject to change, right? That's the critical thing. But there are certain ranges. If you've got a business that's doing less than $100,000 in discretionary earnings, that's 5 years old. And then you've got a business that's doing $1 million in discretionary earnings, that's 5 years old, same profit margin, same details. The larger one is worth more, not in dollars, but as a multiple, because it's less risky, right? Because it's more stable. It's got a bigger client base and it's less risk. So therefore less risk equals a higher value. And I'm talking about multiples, not dollars. So there's different ranges. If you're less than 100,000, maybe 100,000 to 500,000, 500 to $1 million, and $1 million plus, you're going to see the multiples jump. So you got to calculate where you are. But at 500,000 today, are we talking FBA business? Are we talking Shopify type of store? What are we talking about?
Yeah, FBA business.
Okay. So an FBA business with $500,000 in discretionary earnings today, if you don't have any hero SKUs, or if there's not a huge fear of obsolescence, like it's in the electronic space or cell phone case space, where it's constantly changing, it's going to change, and the new owner has to keep up with that. You're probably in that 3.5 to 4 time range anyway, right? I love to give broad ranges. I think in the book, in $500,000, I may say anywhere from 2 to 4 times or 2 to 5 times. Subject to change, though. We recently had a listing in the pet space where it's got recurring revenue and wholesale revenue, and it's doing less than $250,000 in discretionary earnings, and it's sold at a 6-time multiple because it's in the pet space, recurring revenue, and buyers love the pet space. So it varies greatly. I can tell you that a few years ago, if we were listing an FBA business for sale, we might have maximum listed it at 2.74 so that it rounds down to 2.7 online. Because anything above that, buyers are like, I'm not doing that. That's too much risk. It's an Amazon business. It's crazy. The sky's falling. Nobody wants to buy those. Wasn't the case, obviously. They all thought Amazon was going to take over their brands and kick them out. Today, there are smart people like the guys at Thras that have raised a lot of money that have proven that it's okay to buy FBA businesses, and it's happening in a great level now. So the multiples are getting pushed up. So, I think you'd comfortably say 3 to 4. In some cases, you may be able to go over 4 or 5 times. I talked to someone the other day that has a portfolio. It's not an aggregator of FBA businesses, but historically he's been buying up e-commerce businesses and tries to get them below 3 times. He said to me the other day, I have to pay 5 to 7 times now just to be competitive and buy that business. So the multiples have gone up pretty dramatically.
It's good to see that creep, that the creep up in multiples. And that's something that has never made any sense to me. Again, as I mentioned, I did a lot of buy-side due diligence for private equity funds, and take your average manufacturing company in Ohio, right? I did a lot of deals that were in Ohio and were manufacturing, and those would tend to trade for, somewhere between 7 and 9 times EBITDA, which for purposes of this conversation is very similar to seller's discretionary earnings. And I could never understand why there was such a gap there. And the one thing that I've come up with was there's a lack of assets on the balance sheet of an e-commerce company. For instance, on my balance sheet, I have my computer in inventory. That's it. Whereas those manufacturing companies, they have a lot more CapEx. They may have long-term contracts, but from an investor standpoint, you're looking for cash flow and return. And so it always almost bothered me a little bit that there was such a discrepancy between, your e-commerce businesses and like your traditional brick and mortar manufacturing, say.
Well, think about how long they've been around, right? Brick and mortar manufacturing, hundreds of years. E-commerce, really? A decade? Right? I know it's been 20 years, 21, 22. I think my first e-commerce site was built in 1998 for $50, right? It's been around, but not at the level where the businesses are mature and they're real. And Amazon and Google have done lots of algorithm updates where people are not cheating and lying and stealing at the level they could have even a decade ago. These are real businesses with real value, and private equity firms and others are starting to understand that. They're started by bootstrap entrepreneurs that just want to fire the man. They just want to work from home, see their family more, and they bootstrap it, and they turn a side hustle into a full-time gig. And then, like we talked about at the beginning, they get to their own level of competence and they just want to move on to their next adventure. That's when it's time to sell. And these folks will buy it. They'll still, relative to the manufacturing companies, the multiples are still low. So they're still very attractive. Eventually, the multiples will continue to climb, but how long of a period that will be, time will tell. Right now, there are more buyers than sellers, right? You're in a good situation as a seller. If you put the right package together and you want to exit, you can move on. One of the evolutions of the aggregators is that, some of them they're competing with each other, and some of them are now offering equity roles, right? So they may buy 70% they'll buy 100% of your company, 70% in cash, and then you're going to roll that 30% into a new co, and you're just going to become a strategic advisor. You're not going to do anything. Well, that 30% instantly becomes worth 8 to 10 times because it's in their larger portfolio. You just have to be brave enough to stick around for a second exit that may take 5 to 7 years. So that 70% has to be big enough for you. And then you can still go off and do your own FBA business in non-competing categories. But it's something that is starting to happen a little bit as well. And I think that's going to be attractive for the right entrepreneurs that are willing to take that second bite of the apple, because often that second bite, if it's done right, can be larger than the first bite, even if it's a smaller percentage of the overall original asset value.
So let's take it back about 12 months ago. We got the pandemic hit and kind of all hell broke loose. But prior to that, at least in my experience and from other people I've talked to, the growth of, the primary range of, say, Amazon native businesses, like 100% year over year. Would you agree in that range?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
We were seeing pretty strong year-over-year growth. You know, I can't say that it went up dramatically in 2020 and where it will be in 2021. It's still up.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to give you percentages that we as a company at Quiet Light has grown year over year. It's substantial, but it hasn't, you know, tripled that substantial rate just because COVID hit and more people are buying online. It's a little bit of COVID, but it's a lot of the aggregators as well. Not because they're buying, but because they're educating, and they're educating, you know, people in the FBA world through hitting them with 1 million emails every day that they do have a sellable asset. The question is, what is the real value of that asset, and how are you going to exit it in a way that's going to put as much cash in your pocket and help you sleep later on?
Sure. Now, have you seen, you know, with all the changes in the last 12 months, we have, you know, supply chain impact. It's really tough to get, you know, goods over. You have freight. Freight has like tripled.
Yep.
You have, I just read something yesterday, Marketplace Pulse put out, Amazon ads just in 21, the first 6 months, their ad has went up 35%, the cost of advertising. So with all that in play, have you, the businesses that you've taken a hard look at, has the increase in revenue, has it stayed pace or has it slowed down, and as well as profit? I mean, with all of these squeeze plays here, what are you seeing?
Yeah, no, it's a little of both, right? The revenues, you know, again, every business is different. Some are struggling for one reason or another. It may be the owner, it may be the niche. But the question of increased freight charges has come up, right? In due diligence in some situations, if they just went up, a buyer will say, well, look, I need an adjustment because the new normal, just like I said, a reduction in cost of goods sold is the new normal. You do an add back for that because that reduction is going to carry forward to the new owner of the business. You may have to do an adjustment to the new normal because of freight charges going up. The only problem with that is, similar to the tariffs, was it feels temporary, right? So we didn't do any adjustments for the most part for tariffs because it was political and it's temporary. How long will the increased freight charges last? If it feels temporary, where there won't be an adjustment for it, if the buyer wants to make an adjustment for that, they need to do it before signing the letter of intent. There's no adjustments after the fact. You agree on all the terms of it, and then you're in due diligence and you verify the numbers. And if there's any changes, it's math and logic, but you get it all up front in the letter of intent. But it is, Ken, you know, question that has come up, especially in regards to the freight. Just a question of if there's a shrinkage of discretionary earnings as a percentage of total revenue or not. If it's a not, then it's not an issue. If it is in the last 12 months, then it may become an issue for the seller and the buyer.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Now going back to the book, the EXITpreneur's Playbook. I really like that name, by the way. That's pretty slick. So in reference to Playbook, now when I think of a playbook, I think of, like, you know, football or basketball. I'm kind of opening that playbook and I'm looking around. Now, is this a book, like, for me, I'll read a book once, and it's usually, I probably won't revisit it. Now, David, on the other hand, David likes like little Post-its, and he'll tag every page on there. So is this a book, like, for David, where, you know, after all of our listeners go buy the book, when they have it, are they going to want to tag those pages, come back to it? Is that kind of how you structured it?
Yeah, it's not a memoir, right? You're not going to read it once and put it down. It's not my life. It's as somebody put it, the ultimate guide to selling your online business. That's what it is. You're going to dog ear it. You're going to tab, you know, I hope, look, this is me speaking as the author, but the goal would be having you highlighting it, underlining it, dog earing it, sharing it with somebody, and using it as a reference guide. You go, okay, look, I'm working on my ad back schedule. What the hell did Joe say about level 6 and stuff? You know, or you're in the middle of negotiations with one of these aggregators, and you go back to that chapter on negotiations and deal structures. It's there for you. It should be a part of your toolbox, a reference guide, an ultimate guide, something that you'll refer back to and dog ear the hell out of, hopefully.
Gotcha. Yeah, I will do that. This will be my first one.
Good. I want to see it all messed up and dog-eared and highlighted and pages torn out and Post-its and all that stuff. Let's do this again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's right. In prepping for this interview, was doing some reading, and you talk in your book about the ignorance discount. Can you talk about that and what that means?
Yeah, and it's not meant to be insulting, right? Ignorance discount is something that sellers give their buyers when they don't do their homework, when they don't get trained, right? So they get an offer from an aggregator or a neighbor or somebody that reached out to them, and they run their profit and loss. They don't fully understand all the nuances of accrual accounting versus cash accounting, adjustments in the add back schedule for an employee that is now outsourced at half the cost 6 months through the year, and so on and so forth. If you don't get trained for all of those things, you're giving your buyer an ignorance discount, meaning you're getting less for the business and they're getting instant equity. They absolutely love ignorance discounts. That's why, in closed rooms and closed conversations, the aggregators of the world are going to prefer to buy from you directly because they know you're going to get an ignorance discount if you don't do your homework, if you don't get trained. Publicly, they'll say they love buying from advisors because we do all the work for them. We give them a beautiful package with a pretty ribbon on it, and they get to make a quick decision. And so there is a balance of what they buy between direct and advisors. They can't buy enough from us. We don't have everything that they need, right? They've got to go direct as well. But that ignorance discount is when you don't bother getting trained and you don't understand the true value of the asset that you have, and you go ahead and sell it when someone reaches out to you, or when you're tired and you wake up and decides, I can't do this anymore. It's too much risk, too much overhead. Let me just get it done. That's a total ignorance discount. You don't want to do that. You worked your butt off for this, right? You don't want to do that. There are little nuances, and I will shut up about this, but there are little nuances in there where if you just pay attention and get trained on little things, you're going to add $5, $10, $20, $50,000 to the bottom line discretionary earnings. And then you're going to apply a multiple to that. If you do that well in advance of selling your business, you will make more money by really understanding that part of the business than you will by adding new SKUs. It's really that simple. Is that too much of an explanation there? I could go on forever. Sorry.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And I think as entrepreneurs, we're always thinking about the product launch. We're always thinking about, negotiating with suppliers, but just having a good core understanding of what's going on as you approach an exit, that makes total sense and probably is a lot less heavy lifting as opposed to, launching several more products. So
buyers love, clear paths to growth, new SKUs that have been launched in the last 12 months or new SKUs that are ready to launch. You just want to make sure that if you're launching them on your own, that you're at least breaking even on them, as you're moving up to the a listing of your business. You don't want to have a negative number there because it's just going to be that negative number time the multiple, and it's going to be that much of a discount off the purchase price of the business.
Yeah. So Joe, as we're coming up on time here, we have a fire round on Firing the Man podcast. It's a couple quick questions. Fire round. Are you ready?
No. Yes. Yes. I'm ready.
All right. This is the first one is actually kind of ironic. What is your favorite book, Joe?
Other than mine, it would be Traction by Gino Wickman. Gino is on the cover of the book, so I have to say his book. But I do actually love his book. I'm reading it now for the third time. So Traction by Gino Wickman.
Okay, excellent. What are your hobbies?
I work out on a regular basis with a group of guys that just love to kick my butt. Number one, love to hike and travel when the pandemic is not here. So pre and post pandemic, we've loved to, as a family, spend as much time as we can traveling the world together.
Nice. Yeah, be doing more of that in the future, right?
Absolutely.
All right, this is a new one we've added here. Since you've been, self-employed for 24 years here, what is the one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Showing up when they want me to show up, right? I'm supposed to be there at certain times. I can work if I wake up at 2:00 in the morning, I can't sleep and I want to get something done, I can get it done. I can get more done. So I don't miss that at all. I love the fact that I can work whenever I want from wherever I want, and that I'm not reporting to anyone but myself.
Nice. Yeah, I like that. It's a beautiful thing. All right, last one. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's a mindset. It's a bit of a F this mindset. I'm going to go ahead and jump in here and take all the risk and hope it pays off. And a mindset of I'm willing to work twice the amount of hours, 3 times the amount of hours for less money in order to have the freedom and flexibility that I want and be out and on my own.
How can people get a hold of you, Joe?
The EXITpreneur's Playbook can be found on Amazon. Just do a search for EXITpreneur or go to exitpreneur.io. Or if you want to get a valuation for your business, you can go to exitpreneur.io or quietlight.com.
Very nice. And we'll post links to all of that in the show notes. Joe, thank you for your time and appreciate you being on the Firing the Man podcast.
You bet, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.